"You've seen me undressed. Now you must marry me or they'll punish us both," said the Apache girl. "Before we dive into the tale, don't forget to like the video and comment where you're watching from." Las Cruces, New Mexico Territory, late spring 1879. The night's rain had left the dirt streets dark and heavy, wagon ruts filled with shallow pools that mirrored the weak morning light. The air carried a mix of wet soil, mesquite smoke, and the sour bite of beer drifting from the saloon across the road. Cole Maddox stepped off the street and onto the warped porch of the railman's boarding house. He was 32, lean, weathered by years outdoors, his calm face marked by the kind of endurance born from surviving things most men never spoke of. Once, he'd been a scout for the U.S. cavalry during the Apache Wars, riding through country where a single mistake meant death. That life had taught him to sense danger before it showed its teeth. Now he worked for a freight company, guarding wagon trains between settlements. Today, he was in Las Cruces to collect payment for a shipment: bolts of cloth, barrels of flour, and a crate of tools sent from Mesilla. The job was simple: get paid, gather his supplies, and ride north by afternoon. Inside, the lobby held the faint glow of a single oil lamp. The air was stale. A broad man with a flushed red face leaned back in a chair, boots crossed, chewing a matchstick. Another lay passed out on a bench, an empty bottle balanced near his hand. Cole nodded at them and headed down the narrow hallway toward the owner's office. Halfway there, he stopped. A sound soft, sharp, too alive to be wood settling. A woman's muffled cry. His pulse quickened, not in fear, but in the hard focus that came when a man knew he might be walking into trouble he hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. He followed the noise to a door with peeling paint and a bent latch. No lock. The frame was cracked from being forced too often. He pressed his palm to the wood and pushed. The door opened with a low groan. The room was barely the size of a closet. One narrow cot, a tin basin, a nailed-shut window above. The air smelled of damp cloth and unwashed skin. In the corner crouched a young Apache woman. Early 20s, bronze-skinned, her long black hair damp. Whether from rain or sweat, he couldn't tell. She wore only a thin off-white shift, torn at the neckline and ripped high on one thigh, clinging to her in the humid air. Her eyes fixed on him, dark, unflinching. Fear lived there, but under it burned defiance, maybe anger. Cole froze in the doorway, his hand still on the frame. He'd seen women in desperate situations before, most ending badly. But this one carried no plea in her eyes. Only a warning. "Don't mistake me for helpless, you've seen me like this, cowboy," she said, her voice low, deliberate, her accented English cutting through the still air. "Now you must marry me or they'll kill us both." Cole's brow furrowed. The words didn't make sense yet, but the tone did. He glanced back into the empty hallway. "Who's coming?" "They keep me here," she said quietly. "They say I'm not worth trading anymore. They'll sell me to the ones who kill quick." Her voice didn't tremble, but her fingers were tight around the torn hem of the shift. Before Cole could ask more, the hallway erupted, heavy boots thudding on planks, a spur scraping metal. A man's voice, thick with whiskey, barked. "Time's up." Another laughed. Short, mean. Cole stepped fully into the room and closed the door with his heel. The noise grew closer. Someone grabbed the handle. "What's this?" A man shouted. "You think she's yours now?" Cole slid the shaky chair beneath the knob. He didn't answer. His mind ran fast. He could walk away, tell himself this wasn't his fight. But the memory of other women, other rooms, burned too deep. He turned to her and pointed at the nailed window. "We can get out that way." She hesitated, studying him. Men had given her orders before, and everyone had cost her. But his voice was calm, his eyes steady. She gave a quick nod. Cole crossed the small space, pulled his folding knife, and wedged it under the window sash. The paint cracked with a dry snap. He pushed until the frame gave. Then he shrugged out of his trail coat and offered it to her. She paused, then took it, slipping it over her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame but covered her skin. A fist hit the door hard. The chair jumped. "Out," Cole said, voice firm but low. He lifted her by the waist, careful, setting her feet on the damp ground outside before climbing after her into the narrow alley. The smell of wet dust hit his lungs. He caught her hand, not gripping, just guiding, and they moved quickly past barrels and the saloon's back door. Shouts broke out behind them, boots pounding in pursuit. At the edge of the freight yard, his wagon waited. Canvas top, water barrel, a rolled bed in the corner. Cole helped her climb in, dropped the flap, and took the driver's bench. The rein snapped, the team lurched forward, hooves splashing through puddles. The noise behind them faded, but Cole didn't look back. He could feel her eyes through the canvas, and he knew his simple job had just turned into something else entirely. The wagon jolted over a rut as Las Cruces disappeared behind them, the wet streets giving way to low, open hills scattered with mesquite. Cole kept the horses steady, not too fast to draw notice, not slow enough to be caught. The rain had cooled the ground, but the heat was already creeping back. His hands stayed tight on the reins, eyes scanning the road and the brush. Inside, Tahana sat cross-legged on the bedroll, wrapped in his coat like a blanket. The wagon swayed with each bump, every jolt tightening her grip. She forced her breathing calm, though her chest still ached from fear. The faces of the men haunted her, laughing, drunk, certain they could decide her fate. Cole stepping between them didn't mean she trusted him, but he hadn't touched her except to help. That meant something. She pulled the coat closer and looked toward the front. "Where are you taking me?" "North," he said without turning. "Got freight to guard up to Mesilla Springs. After that, we'll see where it's safe. What'll you do when we get there?" Her tone was flat but testing. "That depends on whether those men follow," he said. "You got anyone who'd come looking for you?" "No," she answered after a pause. No one left. Her gaze dropped. Cole had expected that. He'd seen too many raids leave nothing but survivors carrying that same mix of grit and grief. The road dipped into a shallow wash. He slowed the team, guiding them through soft sand where tracks would vanish. If anyone followed, they'd lose time. When they climbed back to solid ground, he let the team walk and reached for a canteen. He passed it through the canvas flap. "Drink, it's a ways before we stop." Tahana hesitated, then took it. The water was cool, metallic, steadying. She drank twice before handing it back. "Why did you help me?" "I didn't see much choice," Cole said. "They were going to hurt you." "I was there. That made it my problem." He paused, then added quietly, "I don't walk away from that." Her eyes stayed on him a moment longer before she leaned back, pulling the coat tighter around her. She didn't reply, but something in her shoulders eased. By midday, the hills opened into a stretch of pale, wind-bent grassland. Cole steered the wagon toward a cluster of low trees near a dry creek bed and drew the team to a stop. The shade there was thin but enough to dull the heat. He tied off the horses and climbed into the back. "Food?" he asked. She gave a single nod but didn't move until he laid out a tin plate, bread, dried beef, a strip of hard cheese. He pushed it toward her and took his own share after. She noticed he'd given her the larger portion. They ate in silence at first, the dry wind whispering through sparse leaves. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened. "They would have killed you too." Cole looked up. "Figured that's what you meant back in the room." She nodded slightly. "They believe if an Apache woman is seen unclothed by a white man, she's ruined. No worth to trade, no worth to keep." Her gaze hardened. "And the man, they kill him for touching what they claim belongs to them." Cole's jaw tensed. "Doesn't sound like any of it's worth keeping." They finished the meal without another word. When the plates were cleared, he checked the harness and made sure the wagon was ready to roll. Tahana, unprompted, folded the blanket neatly and placed it along the wagon wall. She caught him watching and held his eyes for a heartbeat before turning away. By late afternoon, they reached a small water stop, a lonely hand pump beside a weathered shed. Cole refilled the canteen, scanning the wide, open plain. No riders in sight, but that didn't mean none were coming. As the wagon moved north again, the sun sagged low, stretching long shadows over the trail. Cole knew they'd need to stop before dark, somewhere quiet, hidden enough that a small fire's glow wouldn't betray them. He also knew the next leg would bring them closer together. Same wagon, same fire, no walls between. That kind of closeness could build trust or break it. He didn't yet know which way this woman would turn, but one thing was certain. The choice he'd made back in Las Cruces couldn't be undone. The last light bled across the plains as he guided the wagon off the trail toward a low rise dotted with pinon and scrub oak. It wasn't much, but the ground was high, open, with a view in every direction. If anyone was tracking them, they'd spot a blaze from miles away. So Cole kept the fire small, just enough to boil coffee and cut the chill from the night. He unhitched the team, looping the reins over a low branch. The horses settled quickly, heads bowed in the patchy grass, the sound of their breathing mixing with the sigh of the wind. Cole moved slow and deliberate, checking every harness strap before unrolling the bedding. The quiet work gave him space to think. He still didn't know the full story of how Tahana had ended up in that locked room. He knew the outline of it. Raids, trades, a trail of men who'd claimed ownership, but not the details. Part of him wanted to ask, to know what kind of trouble might still be chasing her. Another part knew that pushing too soon would close her off completely. Tahana stayed close to the wagon at first, his trail coat wrapped tight around her shoulders, eyes following him as he worked. Eventually, she stepped nearer, crouched beside the fire and began arranging the bread and salt pork he'd laid out. Her movements were practiced, efficient, the way of someone used to traveling light, setting camp with little more than what she could carry. Cole poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "We'll ride early," he said. "Get some ground behind us before the sun's up." She nodded, sipping carefully. The heat from the tin cup rose between them. After a moment, she said quietly, "Those men, they'll follow." "Maybe," Cole answered. "Depends if they've got the nerve to ride past the sheriff's line." She studied him over the rim of her cup. "And if they do, then we deal with it when it comes." His tone was steady, not careless, and she seemed to draw a small measure of calm from that. They ate in silence, the fire cracking softly, the wind whispering through sparse branches. Cole noticed she never turned her back to the open plain. Even when she rinsed her hands at the water bucket, she kept her eyes on the trail, alert, like a scout who'd learned the cost of looking away. When the food was gone, Cole reached for his coat, but she stopped him with a small shake of her head. "I'll mend it first," she said. He hesitated, then handed it over. From a small pouch tied beneath the coat, she drew a bone needle and thread. By firelight, she stitched the torn shoulder seam with calm precision. Her hands were steady, the stitches tight. It struck him she was making the coat stronger than before. "You sew like someone who's had to fix a lot with very little," he murmured. Without looking up, she said, "If I waited for someone else to fix what's mine, I'd have nothing left." The words hung between them a long while. When she finished, she folded the coat neatly and placed it beside him. Her gaze flicked toward the wagon, then back to him. "In that room, you didn't look at me the way they did." "Why?" Cole met her eyes. "Because I've seen what happens when men stop seeing a woman as a person. I don't plan on being one of them." She held his gaze for a heartbeat longer before looking away, not in dismissal, but as if storing his answer alongside his actions. The night cooled quickly. Cole spread 2 bedrolls, one on each side of the small fire, giving her space. She lay down, still wrapped in his coat, her hair spilling loose over one shoulder, eyes half closed but alert. Cole sat with his back to a rock, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon until the last line of red faded into black. Hours later, when the wind rose and the fire sank low, he glanced over. She was asleep at last. For the first time since Las Cruces, her face was free of fear. He shifted the rifle, fed another stick to the flames, and kept his vigil. Tomorrow they'd be deeper in open country, fewer places to hide but fewer men to cross. If they could stay ahead another day or two, maybe they'd find a stretch of land where no one knew her name or his. He didn't yet know if she'd want to stay when they found it. But tonight, beneath the faint glow of the fire, it felt possible. Cole woke before dawn, the kind of waking that came from years of light sleep and knowing when the night was done. The air was cold enough for his breath to show in pale wisps. The fire had burned to embers, and the eastern sky was turning gray. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Tahana. She still lay wrapped in his coat, one hand near her face, the other tucked beneath her cheek. Her hair had fallen across her skin, softening her features. She looked younger like this, without the hardness she carried when awake. He knew better than to mistake rest for peace. Sleep didn't erase what she'd endured, but it was the first time since that back room in Las Cruces that she seemed untouched by fear. Cole splashed his face with cold water and began packing camp. They'd ride early, keep distance between them and whoever might still be following. As he worked, he found his thoughts drifting to her question from the night before, why he hadn't looked at her the way those men did. Others had asked him that once or twice, but this time the answer had weight. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, the wagon was ready. He poured water into the pot, the scent of coffee rolling through the morning air. That, more than anything, stirred her awake. She sat up slowly, pushing her hair back and pulling his coat close. You didn't wake me, she said, voice husky with sleep. Didn't need to, Cole replied. I had it handled. She looked at the gear tied down in the wagon bed. You've been at this alone a long time. Long enough, Cole said. He didn't add that solitude made things simpler. No one to lose, no one to guard. Yet when she stepped nearer the fire and accepted the tin cup he held out, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong about that. While they drank, he finally asked the question that had lingered since Las Cruces. How'd you end up in that room? Her gaze stayed on the cup. Taken from my people 2 years back. Passed from camp to camp. Sometimes traded, sometimes gifted. The last ones brought me here, said I'd fetch a price if I stayed clean. Then one tried to take what wasn't his. I fought, tore the shift. After that, they said I was ruined. She looked up at him. No self-pity, just truth worn flat and dry. That's when they locked me away. Couldn't decide what to do with me. Cole nodded slowly. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it landed sharper. No one out there looking for you? No one left, she said. He didn't press her further. Some things were clearer left unspoken. They packed up fast, the trail bending through a shallow canyon most of the morning, sandstone walls keeping them hidden. Cole rode steady, glancing back now and then. No dust. No riders. By midday, they stopped at a narrow creek, shallow enough to cross, deep enough to drink from. Tahana washed her hands and face, then wrung out the shift beneath the coat and laid it on a rock to dry. Every motion was practiced, efficient. Cole noticed she didn't shy from him anymore. Not careless, but no longer guarded either. Trust maybe in small steps, he handed her his blue work shirt. Wear this till it's dry. She pulled it on, sleeves hanging past her hands, hem brushing her knees. You got more shirts? 2, he said. I'll manage. They ate by the creek, hard bread, jerky, and moved on. The road climbed to a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, Cole spotted a thin ranch track winding toward a cluster of cottonwoods. We'll camp there, he said. Water, maybe some cover. By the time they reached it, the sun had dropped low. The cottonwoods shaded a slow bend in the creek, their shadows long and cool. An old line shack stood nearby, worn but standing. Cole checked the hinges, creaking but sound. Inside, a bunk, a stove, enough space for 2. When he turned back, Tahana was at the creek's edge, watching the light fade. Her face looked different, softer, less hunted. This place is quiet, she said. For now, Cole replied, and quiet's worth keeping. That night, the stove and fire pushed back the cold. They ate at the small table, silence no longer heavy between them. When she met his eyes across the lamplight, it wasn't a challenge, just steady, searching. Something unspoken, new. Not safety, not yet, but closer than yesterday. And that was enough. Morning broke clear and cool, the sky pale blue, promising heat later. Cole was outside before sunrise, tightening the harness, checking axles. Tahana came out soon after, his coat still draped around her, hair braided back. She looked more rested than before. Inside, the stove was cold, but the air still smelled faintly of bread and coffee. Cole set a fresh pot on the coals while she washed at the creek. He watched her, eyes always moving, scanning the slope and tree line. Not fear, just habit. They ate quick, bread, dried meat, coffee, then stayed to mend gear. Cole's saddle blanket needed patching, her shift had new tiers. She worked without being asked, stitching while he sharpened his knife. By mid-morning, the quiet broke. A low tremor in the air, hooves far off. Cole's head lifted, eyes narrowing east. Tahana saw it too, setting the needle aside. Stay inside, Cole said, moving to the wagon. He grabbed the rifle, leaned it by the door, checked his revolver. He didn't plan to fire unless there was no other way, but he wouldn't be caught unready. Moments later, 3 riders came into view, moving at a steady lope. Not wandering, hunting. Cole recognized one, the man who'd laughed outside that locked room in Las Cruces. They stopped 50 yards out. The leader held his horse still while the others spread a little, measuring the place. Cole stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, stance easy but firm. Morning, the leader called, voice slick with false politeness. Cole said nothing. The man grinned. We're looking for a girl. An Apache, small one, the man said. Might have been wearing a shift last time we saw her. You seen anyone like that? Cole kept his tone calm. No one here you need to worry about. The man's eyes slid toward the shack. Word is she left town sudden. Be a shame if she ran into trouble out here. Cole didn't move. You're the trouble, ride on. That's the only warning you'll get. Silence stretched between them. The man's grin went hard, then he spat in the dirt. jerked his chin to the others and wheeled his horse. "We'll be seeing you, freight man." Cole watched until they vanished over the ridge. He didn't relax. They'd be back, and next time they wouldn't come with just 3. Inside, Tahana stood at the window, eyes following the trail the riders had taken. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "No," Cole agreed, "but neither will I." She studied him for a long beat, measuring whether she could trust that promise. "You could leave me," she said. "Ride on. Let them take me." "Not gonna happen," he answered. She didn't speak again, just sat down, picked up her sewing, and began stitching, small sharp motions, each one tighter than before. By evening, Cole had made his choice. "We move at first light," he said. "Find ground they'll think twice about crossing." Tahana didn't ask where. She only nodded. For the first time, she seemed to accept that wherever they went next, they'd be going together. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the dry scent of dust from the east. Riders somewhere out there. Cole felt it in his gut and set his jaw. If they came for her, they'd have to come through him, and that wasn't going to happen while he still drew breath. Before dawn, the cottonwood stood black against a pale horizon. Cole tightened the last strap on the team, his fingers stiff from cold. Every move was quiet, quick, deliberate. If those men had camped close, he meant to be gone before they stirred. Tahana stepped from the shack as he checked the traces, her braid tied tight, his blue shirt under the trail coat. Her mended shift was folded neatly in the bundle she carried. She scanned the trees the same way he did, slow, alert, eyes cutting through shadow. "You sleep?" Cole asked. "Some," she said. "Enough." They climbed onto the wagon bench. Cole snapped the reins and the team started north along the narrow track. The creek followed them for a mile before turning west. Then the land opened wide, rolling grass and dry washes under a rising sun. For the first hour, Cole didn't speak. His eyes stayed forward, thoughts circling the same worry. How far the men behind them might chase and how little faith he had in law or mercy out here. Distance was the only safety left. By mid-morning, heat shimmered off the trail. Cole slowed the team under a stand of mesquite, giving them shade and breath. Tahana dropped lightly from the bench, stretching. There was a new steadiness to her now, still cautious, but no longer wound tight as wire. While Cole watered the horses, she took the canteen, rinsed her hands, and began checking the lashings on the supplies. "You've traveled like this before," he said. "Not with a wagon," she replied. "But I know how to make things stay where they're meant to." It was a small thing, but it told him plenty. She'd been moved, not lost. She knew how to keep going. They ate bread and jerky in the shade. When Cole offered her more, she tore her portion in half and handed it back. "You'll need it," she said. "I gave you the bigger share yesterday." "I noticed," she said simply. When they moved on, the wind carried the scent of dust again, a faint haze far behind them. Cole didn't mention it, just urged the team faster until the road bent into a canyon. The high stone walls threw them into shadow, hiding them from sight. They stopped near midday beneath an outcrop where a small spring seeped into a stone basin. Cole refilled the canteens while Tahana washed her face. The coat slipped from her shoulders. She pulled it back up without looking his way. "Yesterday," she said, "when those men came, you didn't even think before stepping out." "I thought enough to bring a rifle," he said. "That's not what I mean." She turned, water still on her jaw. "You could have told them I wasn't there. Let them ride on." "And if they'd come inside," he said, "then I'd have to kill them or watch them take you." That wasn't a choice. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back to the water. "No one stood like that for me before." He didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like too much, so he said nothing. And she didn't press. They made camp early on a rise above the trail, the horizon stretching far and empty. Cole built a small fire behind the wagon and set beans to warm. Tahana sorted supplies, folding her mended shift into her bundle. When they sat shoulder to shoulder, on the tailgate, dusk settling around them, she asked quietly, "When this is done, what will you do?" "Depends what done looks like," Cole said. "And if it's safe?" She met his eyes. "Then I'll go where I'm wanted." He realized she'd given him the same answer in her own way. That night, the air bit cold. They bedded near the fire, close enough for warmth, not for touch. Cole lay awake listening for hooves, None came. For now they were ahead. How long that would last he didn't know, but for the first time he cared for reasons that had nothing to do with the chase. By dawn, a hard wind out of the west carried grit across the plain. Cole rose early, tightening straps, securing the canvas. He wanted miles between them and the last camp. Tahana emerged, braid loose, collar turned up against the wind. She handed him the canteen without a word, a small thing, but it told him she was finding her place in the rhythm of the trail. They rolled out before sunrise, the ground rough and stony. When the wagon wheel sank into sand, Cole climbed down to walk beside the team until it firmed again. She followed without complaint, pushing when needed. By midday they reached a shallow gully lined with cottonwoods bending in the wind. Cole watered the horses and checked the rear axle. Tahana crouched beside him, pointing at a worn strap hanging loose from the harness trace. "That one's near breaking," she said. He brushed the cracked leather, nodding once. "Good catch." From the toolbox he drew a strip of rawhide and began replacing the piece. She steadied the harness for him without needing a word, her hands sure and gentle. When they finished, they ate a cold meal, bread soaked in water and a few strips of dried meat. It wasn't much, but it was quick and daylight mattered more. While they ate, Tahana looked south, her face tightening. "I hear something." Cole listened. At first only wind, then the faint, uneven rhythm of hooves. "They're coming," he said quietly. "What will you do?" she asked, her tone calm but low. "Get us hidden." He wasted no more breath. Leading the team into a gully, he steered toward a cut in the bank where the wagon could slip through. The earth was soft with last year's leaves, swallowing the sound of wheels. Between two ridges, he found a narrow hollow deep enough to hide the wagon. They waited. The horses shifted, ears flicking. Tahana crouched by a wheel, eyes locked on the ridge's edge. Soon the riders passed overhead, shadows against the pale sky. One slowed, scanning, but none looked down. When the hoofbeats faded, Cole let out a breath. "We stay off the trail from now." The detour cost them time. They wound through rough ground, crossed dry washes, pushed through mesquite thickets. By sundown, he spotted a rock shelf with a deep overhang, enough shelter for them both. The fire they built was small, a faint glow tucked behind stone. While the beans warmed, Tahana fetched water from a seep, then paused, watching him before she spoke. "You could have fought today." "Would have been dead for it," Cole said. "Fight only when there's no other way." She studied him. "And you'd hide again for me?" "As long as I have to." The quiet that followed felt full instead of empty. She sat beside him till their shoulders brushed, neither pulling away. They ate in that closeness, saying little. When the fire sank to embers, she laid her mended shift by the bedroll. "Tomorrow I'll wear this again, not from shame, but because it's mine." Cole nodded. "Then it stays yours." That night they slept nearer, the cold drawing them under one blanket. No words, no vows. But when he woke once, her hand rested light against his arm, and he didn't move it away. At dawn they broke camp. Mist clung to the rocks, the air smelling of damp soil. Cole drove them north off the open track as promised. The path was rough but safe. Tahana rode beside him, his coat still on her, braid neat against her back. She spoke little, eyes searching the ridges the same way his did. It wasn't his fight alone anymore. By mid-morning the trail narrowed between high cliffs. Cole didn't like it, too many blind turns. He kept one hand on the reins, the other near the rifle across his knees. Then came the echo, hooves fast, closing. "Down!" he ordered. Tahana slid under the canvas. 3 riders burst from the bend, the same ones. The leader reined up 20 yards off, revolver low in his hand. "Told you we'd cross again, freight man," he sneered, glancing toward the wagon. "She's coming with us." Cole didn't rise. "She's my wife." The man's grin bent cruel. "Paper won't stop me." "Maybe not," Cole said, "but this will." The rifle lifted, steady as stone. The others edged wide, trying to flank him. Tahana's voice came low from behind. If you shoot, they'll rush you before you can reload. I know. His finger brushed the trigger. Wind hissed through the gap. No one moved. Then the leader's smirk thinned. Ain't worth dying for, he muttered, jerking his reins. They wheeled and thundered away. Cole held still until the sound was gone, then lowered the rifle. Stay down, he said. When Tahana climbed back to the bench, her eyes were sharp. You didn't have to call me your wife. It made him pause. Cole said simply. If you'll claim it to keep me safe, she said quietly, then mean it. The rest of the day passed in silence. He knew the men weren't finished, only waiting to strike again. But desperation made mistakes, and he'd use that. By late day, they reached a small hollow ringed by willows and a clear stream. It was the safest ground they'd found in days. Cole unhitched the team while she built the fire. The glow painted her face gold. You've risked your life twice for me, she said. And I'll keep doing it till I don't have to, he answered. Then I choose to stay, because I want to. The words settled like something finally true. Cole reached across the fire and took her hand. She didn't pull away. That night they shared one blanket, not from cold, but choice. The creek murmured nearby. For the first time since Las Cruces, a future felt real. Morning came clear and cold. Cole packed the wagon while Tahana stood watch on a rise. They'll come again, she said. Then we finish it, he replied. Running forever wasn't life. He turned the wagon toward a narrow box canyon he'd marked before, one way in, wide enough to turn. He angled the wagon across the mouth, tying the team tight. The walls would funnel the riders straight at him. He checked his rifle, revolver, breath steady. Tahana stood beside him, holding cartridges. If you fall, you ride, he said. Hard, and don't look back. She shook her head. I don't leave you. The thunder of hooves filled the canyon. The leader reined in just outside rifle range, sneering. You've cost me time and money. Hand her over and I'll let you walk. Cole raised the rifle. She's my wife. That's all you need. The man's face hardened and he spurred forward. Cole fired. Dirt kicked up at the horse's hooves. The beast reared, screaming. The second shot grazed another rider's arm. Next one higher, Tahana said calmly. The leader saw it then, the steadiness in Cole's eyes, and turned, cursing as they fled. Silence rushed in behind them. Tahana touched his arm. It's done. Yeah, he said softly. They cleared the canyon and rode north until the rock opened to a broad valley lined with cottonwoods and a running stream. Cole pulled the team to a stop. This could be home. Tahana walked to the water, stood a moment, then smiled back. First place that feels like we could stay. That night the fire burned easy. After supper, Cole pulled a thin leather strip from the chest, looping it into a ring. Not silver, he said, but it'll do. She slid it on. It's enough. When they lay down, there was no need for distance. Her head rested against his chest, his arm around her, and the night felt still. By dawn, they'd chosen to remain. Cole would raise a cabin by the stream. Tahana would plant her garden. It wouldn't be hiding, it would be living. And when, weeks later, the wind carried the faint sound of riders, neither of them stirred. Those men had already lost.